Okay, this video is from the book Food, Mood, and IQ by me, Pete Rogers. We're in chapter 3, part 2. We started out talking about this book here called Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And what he basically says is the more kids use a cell phone, the more social media they use, the more messed up the kid is, the more mental illness the kid has, the worse they perform in school. I'll show you a graph of that. It's a pretty steep curve. The more social media and cell phone usage, the more the kid has anxiety, depression, self-harm, weird things like where they cut themselves, addiction to drugs. They're impulsive, they're unhappy, they have fragmented attention, poor performance in school. And I can also tell you just my experience from the kids. I had a big disagreement with my wife. She wanted the kids to get a cell phone as soon as possible so that they could call her whenever they needed a ride home and work things out with the babysitter and everything else. I was totally against it. I'm like, no cell phones for grade school kids, and let's figure out a way to minimize them in high school kids. I never had a cell phone. I was fine. And what I saw happen was the children would sleep with the cell phone near their head. You had to go into the room at night to move it so they wouldn't sleep with it near their head. If you take it away, they go crazy. I also saw that, like my daughter, for example, my wife bought her a cell phone when she was quite young. She was the smartest of all my kids, and she would always be reading books, and she would talk to me, "Oh, Daddy, here's a book I read." And as soon as my wife bought her cell phone, she never read another book. What she did from that point on was she just wanted to be with her friends. So they send text messages to their friend. They want to go play with their friends, and they lose interest completely. Cell phones, it's designed to be addictive. It's designed to get the kids to be that way. And it's actually part of, you would call it, for lack of a better word, the cow, moon, east movement, to make children as socially interested as they can and possible with kids their own age. It makes them stupid. Children learn when they're around adults. They learn when they're around their older brothers and sisters. They don't learn much around children their own age. Yeah, it's good to have friends, but friends are quite overrated when kids are young, and they get them into mischief and stupidity. That lady, Ayn Rand, she's a genius. She wrote a great book called Compra Chicos. Compra Chico means like buying children. And the weird thing about it was that what she was talking about was the schools intentionally put all the children in the same age groups through each of the individual grades. And on the surface of it, that sounds like a reasonable thing to do, but it's actually a very bad thing to do. Because she says what happens is when all the kids are the same age, none of them knows anything, so they can't help each other, and they all just focus on being popular, and they forget about learning anything, and it creates, stupid land. Okay, the book goes into more detail then. Here's the same graph, but with more detail. The more cell phones they use, the more social media, more time on the internet, the more they become anxious, the more depression there is, the more girls harming themselves. The reason why the girls start to self-harm themselves and they become freaked out is because they see all these beautiful women on the internet. And on the internet, some girls are pretty sophisticated with using drawing programs and photo editing programs, and they can make themselves just absolutely beautiful, like perfect tens. In real life, a woman who's a perfect 10 in beauty is a very rare thing, okay? But on the internet, they're a dime a dozen. They're so common. And so just a regular, normal girl, she could never look like that. And they become sad and depressed. Oh, I'll never be this beautiful. I'll never, have a boyfriend. I'll never have a husband, etc. Okay? And actually, I think the likelihood of women have husbands in the future is going to go way down. Because what I've seen happen is, my generation, we got chumped, okay? We married, and these women turned into feminists and, stabbed us in the back and divorced us and caused all kinds of misery and trouble for us and our families. But the younger generation, they saw what happened to their fathers, and they're like, whoa, look what happened to my old man. I'm not getting married. So they don't want to marry these girls. And I've told you, too, when a woman's promiscuous, that's like one of the worst things she could do if she wants to attract a husband. Because why marry a woman unless you want to have kids with her? And if she's going to be promiscuous and you're not even going to know if the kid's yours or not, then why bother with her? You can get, the two-back beast without having to marry her. So I think tons and tons of women are going to find that men do not want to marry them. They're not going to put a ring on their finger. And not only that, they're going to be infertile because they're sort of pressured to delay having babies into their 30s and even in their late 30s. And the more they go down that route, trying to be like men, make partner at a law firm or something else, the more of them I think are going to find themselves no husband, no children, lonely old cat ladies. Some of the other things here. So that's why the girls cut themselves, because they feel they could never meet these unrealistic beauty expectations. More and more kids have attention deficit, learning disabilities, are being diagnosed with anorexia, these unrealistic body expectations, being diagnosed as so-called bipolar, substance abuse, mental health hospitalizations. Surprising number of kids on opioids. I've known several people who've lost their child due to opioid overdose. Opioids are much more dangerous than people think. I can remember when they came in marketed, pain management, and doctors would get in trouble if they didn't prescribe pain medicines. So like, okay, fine, you want your pain medicines? Fine, here you go. I can remember those days. Okay, more sleep deprivation in these kids, more, as you move away from a Christian sense of life has meaning, more kids with this sort of confusion, lack of purpose in their life. As you move away from Christianity and life has meaning intrinsically, there's more suicide and stuff. More loneliness, more pessimism. The kids are less resilient. They're weak in their reading skills, social skills, academic skills, spend less time with their friends, less time outdoors. So it's all bad. Like I said, it's all bad. And people say, Steve Jobs is a hero. Steve Jobs made an animal tracking device. You ever wonder why you can't turn a cell phone off? Because they want it to track you, okay? It's not your friend as much as you think. It's more of this panopticon, okay? Jeremy Bentham control system, another way to track you everywhere. Like your car is a GPS, like your credit card purchases are recorded. Okay, I just tell you that so, people should realize that that ain't the path to freedom. Okay, let's see. He never talks about the brain damaging effect of holding your cell phone to your head. At least he talked about how cell phones and the internet are bad. What does he recommend as a solution? That families should not buy their kids a cell phone when they're young, and that they should work with the other parents to get to school to not let the kids use their phone during the day, that they have to put it into their locker and they can't look at it between classes because otherwise they sort of start using it more and more and it becomes a problem. So he says only if they lock it up all day does it work out. Let's see. And also, like a typical college professor, he's an atheist and he's considering Buddhism and all this nonsense, okay? So, again, the more the USA turns away from its Bible-based traditions and Christianity as a worldview, the more it turns into a third world crap hole. The USA is descending into barbarism, okay? The stock market's down and the crime rates are up. The borders are, open, and, the aliens are crowding in by foot or by boat. You have to understand yourself, why would all this be happening? The reason it's happening is the really, really rich people, okay, the billionaires, what do they want? If you give a man unlimited power, they're going to end up being like some of these bad Roman emperors. They're going to want unlimited, two-back beast, X slaves. Okay, that's what they're going to want. They're going to want unlimited power. And, the Roman emperors, they would declare themselves to be a god. And if we have atheistic Darwinism, they can essentially do that. And then they would insist on having a different concubine female every day. Okay, Nero, if he thought a teenage girl was pretty, he would sometimes send his troops to go bump off her family and then just have her kidnapped and brought to him as a sex slave, okay? I know that's awful, but that's reality. And that's why you want checks and balances in a system so that the little guy has some freedom, some independent ability to live their own life. And the only thing that can do that is Christianity, because it says, like a Bible-based worldview, the individual is intrinsically worthwhile, created in the image of God. As Ayn Rand had said, if you respect individual rights, you'll respect all rights. The individual is the smallest minority. And you have to give him that much credit. We're all equal in the eyes of God. Okay, the little guy and the big rich guy. Those are the things you need to protect the citizen. Where does the freedom come from? It comes from Christianity. It comes from capitalism, whereby it's in everybody's interest to help each other. And it comes also from the rights, enshrined in the Constitution. Okay, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, Declaration of Independence, free speech, and all this stuff. The right to privacy, the right to property, all these things. And I can tell you, the really rich ones who run the world, they don't want you to have that. They want you to just be a slave and shut your mouth, and that's what this is all about. And that will give them unlimited access to a different concubine of any age every day of the year. That's just how it is, okay? That's a little harsh, but it's the reality. Okay, and also these amoral college professors, they serve the beast, if you will. And same thing, psychology in general is sort of the priests of modernism. They accept whatever fad comes along. Okay, now we're going to get into this book right here. Oh, actually, one last comment. More and more women are, sacrificing children on the altar of convenience. Okay, it's called an abortion. And they then take these bodies and run them through like the equivalent of a stolen car auto chop shop, and they break them up into pieces, and they sell some of their parts to make medications taken orally. They also use them for research of different types. And again, it's just like Fyodor Dostoevsky said in his book Brothers Karamazov, one of the greatest novels of all time. He said, if there is no God, then everything is permitted, even cannibalism. And yes, it is. Our society promotes cannibalism. Whether you like it or not, if a Martian came here to the Earth and he said, oh, gee, these women are sacrificing their babies for convenience, and they're making them into things that people eat, that's child sacrifice and cannibalism. Okay, and those are those are the groups that we mocked in the Bible as being evil. Okay, well, that's what we are doing now. And no one speaks about it. Okay, no one speaks about children being drugged in the public schools with amphetamines, etc. And it gets worse. It gets much worse than that. Okay, anyways, we're going to talk about this book here. Abigail Shrier, she wrote a book called Bad Therapy: How Come Kids Aren't Growing Up Well. Okay, she's a journalist, but she noticed all kinds of weird things happening with her kid at school. And for example, she took her 12-year-old kid to the pediatrician for a routine visit for a stomach ache. And then the doctor asked her to leave the room, which she thought was strange, and she refused to. And the doctor then and the reason the doctor wanted her to leave the room from her 12-year-old kid, or son, was so he could ask all kinds of weird, perverted questions. So he starts asking, the kids all kinds of questions about things that are none of his business, okay? Bizarre, perverted questions. And this is for a stomach ache. It had nothing to do with the kid's stomach. She noticed that the public schools are hiring more and more psychologists and therapists, and they're giving the kids all kinds of so-called anonymous surveys, and they ask them all kinds of weird questions. Their kids tell them the questions they're asking. Like a typical example questions, they'll ask them, have you ever thought of experimenting with alcohol, with marijuana, with methamphetamine, with opioids? Do your parents drink alcohol? Is anyone at home abusing you? Do you ever think of committing suicide? Are you sexually active? All kinds of questions that basically, with Freudian psychoanalysis, they keep talking about bad experiences and trying to get people to denounce their families. The more you focus and talk about bad things, the more you start thinking about it, Like I can remember when I was a kid in grade school, in health class, we're putting bananas on condoms in health class. Nobody taught us about low-fat vegan diet or epidemiology in health class. You think that doesn't make a teenage kid think about making the two-back beast? Of course it does. So what I'm saying is I believe these questionnaires are deliberately designed to get the kids to start thinking about alcohol, marijuana, methamphetamines, opioids, and all this other problems, okay? And to get them to denounce their parents. And then the schools have mandatory reporting of child abuse, so this stuff's not anonymous. If the kid says, yeah, well, my father spanked me yesterday, well, then they can report the kid to DCSF, the family to DCSF, potentially get those kids taken away from their families, and who knows what's going to happen to that kid. They get taken away from their family, put into a foster home or some, orphan home or some other type of place. Who knows what's going to happen to that kid? Nothing good. They're not going to love the kid like the parents do. Okay. And that kid might end up in the traffic, okay, if you know what I'm saying there. Okay, they're also trying to build up detailed profile lists of the family, perhaps as a way to, blackmail the family later time or blackmail the kid. This is crazy. This is not helpful for the child's education. This is like something that Karl Marx would come up with for control of people, okay? Here's a photograph of Karl Marx back in 1875. And, of course those surveys are not anonymous. It's more of the social control network of BS that people are being exposed to these days. If I would say if you got your kid in a public school, I'd get them out of there as fast as I could. You put them in a Catholic school, the education will still be stupid, but the social stuff won't be so bad. They're not going to try to castrate your kid like they do in the public schools. Anyways, Ms. Schreier noticed that the public schools kept on asking her about bad stuff, and she didn't understand at first, but then she realized it was clear. They're intentionally getting the kids to focus on bad stuff, and this was harming the kids because it was getting the kids to obsess about these things, and it was part of this business of making kids more anxious, upset, and confused. And that's why she called the book Bad Therapy. It makes kids worse. She also said the last thing you would ever want to do if your kid's having problems is take them to a therapist, a psychologist. She said most therapists should be fired. These are her exact words, should be fired on the spot. The therapists are trying to grow their business, and they want the kids to be sick. That's more work for them, okay? More influence for them. Okay, she described parenting as three main categories. She said that American parents, the majority of them tend to be too lenient. And she says if the parents are too lenient over time, the kids grow to hate their parents. And she says this is the most common form of parenting in the West, and it causes lots of problems between the kids and the parents and the kids' behavior. She said the second category was authoritarian parenting. And she said this is very common, most common in third world countries, where the parents are too strict and they don't let the kid talk at all. And that's also bad. The kid doesn't develop. But the best, she says, is what she calls authoritative, whereby the parents are the boss, but they will discuss things with the kid. They'll explain their reasons for things to the kid. Allows the kid some autonomy and ability to debate the situation with the parent. She said this leads to the best morality amongst kids and have them well thought, good self-control, good behavior. So anyways, that's it for today from Food, Mood, and IQ psychology book. Hope that was useful to you.